Alrighty, everybody, and welcome back to the second part of the Locked On Pirates and Locked On Phillies crossover here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I am, of course, your host of Locked On Pirates, Ethan Smith. That over there, if I could point correctly, I can't point correctly. My fingers all over the place, just like the CBA, is Mr. Dan Wilson of the Locked On Phillies podcast. If you checked out part one, we talked about a bunch of fun stuff. This is part two of the podcast. Depending on, I'm not going to say a day because they might drop on different days, but thank you all for making us your first listen of the day here at Locked On Pirates and Locked On Phillies. You can listen to Locked On Pirates on YouTube. You can listen to both podcasts on Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you find your major podcasts. You can find these podcasts there. Of course, Dan, we already were talking about a bunch of stuff. As you can see, most of the domain is still the same, so we don't really need to introduce ourselves again. But Dan is doing great, I assume. And as we were talking about beforehand in the first part, we weren't really talking about a lot of the free agents that are going to be impending in baseball. But I'll pose a question to you, sir. Are big free agents good for baseball? So is it like, of course, being a advocate, well, not an advocate, being a reaper of getting a good free agent on your team through that system of free agency? Are big free agents good for baseball? Does it make the baseball offseason more entertaining? Does it make it more fun?
So I would say from a fan's perspective, it probably depends whether your team's actually in on that guy or not. Like I was willing, again, we talked about this in the last episode, when the Phillies were waiting out Bryce Harper, I was willing to wait out till the end of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Him or Machado, you don't really have a time clock. You're like, all right, if Harper wants to take his sweet old time, if Scott Boras wants to take his sweet old time, if take all the time you need, as long as you
Yeah.
ultimately end up in red Phillies pinstripes, that's okay with me. Now, from an outsider's perspective, the way that free agency is done in baseball doesn't always lend itself to being something positive for the sport. The top guy only really had interest at the very end from the Phillies, the Dodgers, the Giants, which means 27 out of 30 fan bases were kind of like, let's just get this over with already. I just want to know where he's playing. If you're a
Mm-hmm.
bettor, you want to know where he's playing as that affects World Series odds. You want to know, or wins over unders, or whatever the case might be. You want to know where he is just as a general fan of the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you might be betting on where he might end up, but I think ultimately they are. I just think it would be better. And I don't know how you really change this. We were talking about how the NFL and the NBA have a salary cap. So you kind of know how much a big time free agent is going to get. There's not this painstaking negotiation where every little line of a contract
Mm-hmm.
needs to be sorted out and it's going to take 100 days, whatever. I mean, there was a documentary that aired on NBC Sports Philadelphia, the regional sports network that carries all the Phillies games here in Philly, called Signing Bryce, or Signing Harper, rather, that would air all the time during rain delays, off hours, whatever the case might be. It felt like forever. Every now and again, you'll still catch it. But that season, like everyone saw that thing 10 times. You really got to look into, all right, Scott Boras was in no particular hurry. Bryce
Mm-hmm.
Harper was in no particular hurry. He kind of dictated what kind of contract would sign him. Again, 13 years, $300 million. He wanted a deal that would put him on one team for the rest of time. Now, some guys want a shorter deal, whatever the case might be. Some teams might have to go in the luxury tax to sign a guy like that. But there was no. The only reason he got 330 million is because no one was offering 13 years for 340 million. Like it's got to end somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's good when baseball is being discussed. I don't think it's necessary, like the old saying, there's no such thing as bad publicity. Like any discussion is good discussion. The last thing you want is no free agents, no off-season discussion, which unfortunately might be what we're headed for in a lockout. Because when you're in a lockout, there's no like, well, this team might sign today or this team's in talks with this team. You're just at a standstill, and that's bad for baseball. In terms of the long haul of waiting out these big time free agents and getting it to the end, Bryce Harper was talked about every single day. People might gotten sick of it, but at least tells you that people are still interested on where he ends up. I think it would be way more fun if, similar to the NFL or the NBA, guys were signing left and right in the first few days, contracts already pre-made up, and again, we might see something a little bit closer to that in this lockout shortened off season. But in terms of, do I think it's overall, like, if is it overall a net positive or a net negative? I would still say it's a net positive, because if you didn't have those big free agents and no one was talking about baseball in the offseason, how is that better than the alternative?
Yeah,
It just
exactly.
it's a system that needs to be, that could perhaps be refined and improved to compete with other sports, but I don't think it's worse. That, like, if the two options are big free agents or not, give me the big free agents.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, from a Pirate standpoint, tell me why I'm supposed to care. like, I mean, I love seeing big free agents because I like seeing, like, okay, where's this guy going to go? Even if it is the Yankees or the Dodgers or like whoever, it changes a lot of what goes on. Like Bryce Harper going to the Phillies, that was a immediate like jerk back change. Like that was like, oh crap, Bryce Harper just went to the Phillies. Like he didn't go to the Dodgers or the Yankees or something. That was a like knee
And
jerk
Philly's a big
reaction.
market. Yeah, and Philly's a big market for the record, but you're right. It's not the Red Sox or the
Yeah.
Yankees or the Dodgers, like this one of these teams with a tradition like that. He went to the Philadelphia Phillies. You're right.
Yeah, and that's the thing with me is it's like, okay, being a Pirates fan, notoriously, and of course you brought up documentaries, notoriously this team is not known to spend money. You look at the Bonds documentary that came out on Sunday, it was a big reason of why he left Pittsburgh is because one, they weren't going to pay him the money. They threw the money to Van Slyke. Two, his entire freaking family lineage played for the San Francisco Giants, so he was out the door anyway after 92. But seeing big free agents across any sport is a good thing. I mean, Aaron Rodgers next year is basically a free agent in the NFL, even though he's going to be a trade piece, I believe. He's going to be a free agent basically, and there's going to be multiple teams trying to go after a top 5 quarterback in the National Football League. What's more fun, seeing Aaron Rodgers do that or seeing Jameis Winston be a free agent and ask for $25 million a year? Kind of that's where it's at. Would you rather see Kevin Newman be the top shortstop on the market, Pirates fans, or Corey Seager, Javier Baez, Trevor Story, all these guys that are all going to be fending for it? And the even funner part of this, too, with the big free agents is there's already a report from John Heyman that the Yankees are literally talking to the top 5 shortstop guys already. They're talking to all 5 of them, not just 2 or 3. They're like, we're getting one of you. We're just figuring out which one of you pounces first on the offer that we give you. That's what I feel like the Yankees are doing, is they're just saying, we're going to offer you this amount of money. You accept it or don't, we move on to the next guy. That's pretty much where it is. And I do have a bold free agent prediction, by the way. And it's kind of weird because it's a weird team to say this about. I am thinking that one of these guys is going to end up being a Detroit Tiger for some reason.
One of the shortstops, you mean?
Yes, one of the shortstops,
Okay.
yeah. Because there's just been so much buzz about this Tigers team lately that I've seen every early prediction say they're going to be 88-74 and make the wild card and all this other stuff because their team is finally coming together. And I could see a shortstop going there. And also, don't be surprised if one of these guys goes to Boston or like one of those teams either. I know they're not going to play the shortstop position once they get there because Xander is going to have that spot locked up. But don't be surprised if these guys just chase the money and go to big markets. I wouldn't be surprised. But the one guy and another free agent prediction that I can make right now, Correa needs to stay in Houston. He is Houston. That guy is like one of the biggest reasons why the Astros have been so good. I don't think he's going to be as good if he leaves that place. He needs to stay in Houston. That's kind of my stuff about the big free agents, though, is it's like I enjoy seeing it, but the Pirates are never involved, so I'm an outside voice, unbiased voice, because the Pirates, as far as I'm concerned, as Bob Nutting is alive, will never be in on any of these big free agents.
Really quick before we get to our first break here, is that one thing you mentioned is kind of interesting. You're predicting one of these guys will land with the Tigers. We're probably going to see a non-traditional team land one of these shortstops because there are, what, 5 of them, and
Mm-hmm.
because there's 5 of them, and no, like with the Harper Machado offseason, there was theoretically a threat that like the Yankees could sign both of them. Now, I never really believed that would happen, but signing Manny Machado doesn't necessarily preclude you from signing Bryce Harper if you're willing to open up the checkbook.
Mm-hmm.
Signing one of these big time shortstops, like they need 5 different homes, and they might just return to where they've been playing. But you're absolutely right. Like the first few guys are going to go off the board, and someone somewhere, a smaller market team or a less traditional team, such as the Tigers, maybe that's where they strike and they say, all right, we're going to go all in on one of these guys, because the fact that there are 5 of them and 5, teams bidding on all 5 at once certainly helps a team like that than if there was
Mhm.
only one of these guys. If Corey Seager was the only one out there, now you have all 30 teams bidding. That's where you generally see the rich get richer.
Yeah, and exactly, and I agree 100%. And as you did mention, we are going to head to break real quick and let you know that today's episode, of course, is brought to you by the wonderful people over there at BuiltBar.com. Built Bar, of course, is the best tasting protein bar on the entire market. You can't go wrong with it. If you ever want a snack or anything in between lunch and dinner, Built Bar is the way to go. They have 9 unique flavors ranging from German chocolate, cherry barcia, cookies and cream. Basically, anything you can think of, Built Bar has it. Built Bar, of course, they are also phenomenal for you. They have 3 to 5 grams of net carbs and net sugar, 130 to 180 calories. And Built Bar is also the official protein bar of the U.S. track and field team. Feast on something delicious and feel good about it. Built Bar is a great option for when you're hungry. If Thanksgiving isn't coming soon enough, go for a Built Bar or two. There's nothing like a Built Bar Black Friday. Mark your calendar. Black Friday will be a huge event with all sorts of surprises and new surprises all month with limited time flavors arriving at builtbar.com regularly. So go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you'll get 15% off of your order. Make sure you use that promo code LOCK15 at builtbar.com for the best protein bars on the market. So talking free agents, of course, you kind of have to go with the two teams that we cover here. The biggest needs for the Pirates and the Phillies, of course, my Locked On Pirates fam already knows. Most of mine, I will outlay them to you after you go ahead and let some of our listeners and your own listeners kind of figure out what the Phillies are looking at for this entire offseason.
Yeah, so hold on really quickly before we get into that, do have to let the listeners know to thank you for making Locked On Phillies and or Pirates your first listen every single day. We are free and available on all platforms. And you mentioning Thanksgiving, by the way, we're 2 weeks away as we record this, right?
Very, very shocking, by the way, that we're 2 weeks away from
There were
Thanksgiving.
2 weeks away. So really quick before we get into more off-season discussion, because I got to break it up here a little bit. Here's a take I arrived at the other day. I think it seems like everyone either loves Thanksgiving or hates it. Like it's either your favorite holiday, your least favorite. I don't think anyone's like in the middle about Thanksgiving. A, would you agree? And B, what side do you fall on?
I fall on the side of you better not have a Christmas tree up before Thanksgiving starts. So I mean, like Thanksgiving for me, because most of my family is still in Pittsburgh. Sometimes it's a big event, sometimes it's a small event, but I also enjoy everything that comes with Thanksgiving.
Well,
Gotta
I,
love
I
the
meant
food.
I meant more
Gotta
so the
love all that.
food. Whatever your custom is, like the food, in my opinion, phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And the traditions around it. You're right. It's a holiday that it doesn't have the artificial or superficial decorations, holiday music that annoys everybody way too long, beginning from early November. You're absolutely right. I don't think the holiday season should start until the end of Thanksgiving, but I'm also
Mm-hmm.
Jewish, so maybe I shouldn't be the one really weighing in on this. But in terms of like a Hallmark Christmas, I feel like I can criticize that. I'm big on Thanksgiving. I think the food is great. I think the depending on the traditions are great. I think you get a full day of football. Like I don't understand why people are against it. And very recently, I think everyone just needs to have a take these days. People started becoming like started the war on Thanksgiving a few years ago online and stuff like that. So now I am fighting the war on Thanksgiving. Like I am the opposing
Yeah.
force fighting that war. So I really like it. Can't believe we're this close. And in terms of things, I'd like to be thankful for this offseason. I'd like to be thankful for them perhaps getting a big time reliever. Hell of a segue there.
Yeah.
Big time reliever, back end of the bullpen guy, perhaps multiple back end of the bullpen guys. Number of names, whether it's free agency or trade, have been looming, I will say,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's Josh Hader, Craig Kimbrell, Kenley Jansen. They need that. They need a shortstop. Not as badly because it does seem like they have high hopes, as do I, for Bryson Stott to take over that role. They definitely need a center fielder and a left fielder, preferably
Mm-hmm.
one of those guys, prototypically a center fielder, a guy who can lead off. So, if it's my holiday shopping list, so to speak, I think I want a reliever, I want a center fielder, and I want a left fielder, probably in that order. I actually don't feel it's always nice to have pitching depth. I think this team lacks pitching depth.
Mm-hmm.
I think you saw that throwing a bullpen game down the stretch consistently. Um,
Oh
when the
Lord, I
Phillies are in
remember
the title
talking
chase
about that
last
with
year.
you, man.
Yeah, so we could use some pitching depth, but I think they actually have a pretty solid rotation. You'd expect Aaron Nola to not be as bad as he was. Zach Wheeler's a Cy Young finalist. I like Zach Eflin. And the back end is Ranger Suarez. I mean, Ranger Suarez finished the season as your number 2 starter. I said if they'd gotten themselves into a playoff series, like he would be game 2 starter of the NLDS. You figure he regresses, but he was really, really solid in all pitching roles in the year 2021. And then Kyle Gibson, who's like finishes out your rotation. Like I think that's a rotation that could use some upgrades, certainly, but I think it'll play much more than the Phillies' current bullpen and the current outfield minus Bryce Harper.
Oh yeah, of course. And I mean, I couldn't really disagree with a lot of the stuff you said because I mean, the Pirates are kind of looking at some of the same stuff as well. They're looking for a corner outfielder. Of course, Ben Gamble came over from the Cleveland Indians, now the Cleveland Guardians. It has looked very well. Brian Reynolds is Brian Reynolds, who we talked about in part 1. We already know what he is. And outside of that, though, you kind of moved on from Andrew McCutchen. Now, of course, he's not there anymore. So it makes it kind of tough, as well as the fact that you just need to get a corner outfielder before some of these young guys come up. And that's what I've said about the Pirates, and it kind of feels like the Phillies are in the same boat except center field. So it kind of shifts their focus over a little bit. But I've learned something about outfielders after watching the Pirates play a lot this season is outfielders can play any of the 3 spots. If you're a good outfielder defensively, you can play any of the 3 spots and have no problem with it. As far as other needs,
just for reference, look, I loved Andrew McCutchen in the clubhouse, but he finished the season playing left field, not being able to defensively play any of them. So, anything would be an upgrade. Younger days, would love to see that.
We're still trying to get Andrew to come back over here. Anyways, we're not going
to
get
into
that. Well, yeah, because we're not going to get into that too much because, I mean, it'll start we'll have a part 3 of this podcast if I get into that. Anyways, backup catcher was another one for me. Michael Perez just isn't it for me. He's just not very good at all. And Jacob Stallings, of course, wins a Gold Glove, doing a lot of good things. He's up for the Platinum Gold Glove, which I think is very cool. His bat could always be a little bit better, but I mean, oh well, he's the best defensive catcher in all of baseball, arguably the best defender in all of baseball. He led defensive runs saved all year, but you still need a guy behind him because the guy is 32. He can't do this every single day of his career forever. That's just how it is. But also, starting pitching and relief pitching is going to be like the biggest thing for me. And Ben Cherington has already said he wants to attack that part of free agency very heavily. Just because, I mean, you have guys like you mentioned Richard Rodriguez in our past episode. We got Bryce Wilson from the Atlanta Braves. He's looked very good. Mitch Keller is an enigma to all of baseball, and I can't ever figure him out. Miguel Yajure, Roenzi Contreras, Max Kranick, Chase DeYoung, all these young guys, right? But Tyler Anderson was so valuable, and you remember Tyler Anderson, Dan, because we almost traded them to you, and then it didn't happen.
The trade that wasn't. He had a shorter career than his podcast.
Yes, and I remember he actually did very well in Seattle, too, which kind of was unfortunate because me and you were ready to make it happen. But Tyler Anderson was very valuable to this team because he was able to go out there, give you 5 or 6 good innings and say, okay, cool, this is what you're getting from me, and I could teach these guys to give that to you in the future. And I think there's a lot of guys that are available for the Pirates that could make that work. And that's one of the biggest things I think they need to look at is don't bring these guys in on 1-year deals and then immediately offload them. Bring them in on a 2-year deal. Let them pitch all year in 2022. Get some consistently good outings so you're not doing the bullpen game thing like you mentioned because the Pirates are doing it a lot too. Don't kill your bullpen by the time it's June or July to the point where you're already like scrambling to try to figure out who you're going to throw out there. And bringing in 2, maybe even 3 veteran pitchers could be the biggest part of that. And I think that the Pirates and the Phillies too, looking at what they could use, I think that would be a very valuable asset and a very valuable thing for both of them to bring in.
Really quickly before we go to our second break here, I have to ask, because, we've talked a lot about should the Pirates trade Brian Reynolds, should they not?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of timeline, like what is a realistic timeline in your mind's eye for when the Pirates could actually contend again?
So I've been asked this plenty of times, and usually my answer is 2023 is like next year. You're going to see some of the guys come up like O'Neal Cruz, Roenzi Contreras, Swaggerty, Kanan Smith and Jigba. You're going to see some of those smaller guys come up, right? 2023 mid-season, not right at the beginning, but mid-season is when you're going to start seeing the Nick Gonzalez's, the Leo Verpigueros, the Quinn Priesters, the Carmen Majinskis, the top level of your system start coming up. And the thing that I loved about what the Pirates did in this draft is 2023. I'm not saying they're going to compete for a World Series in 2023. I'm saying look baseline, like 82 and 80, 80 and 82, 79 and 83, around that area. 2024, I think, is the cutoff because by then Ben Cherington would have 4 years to figure this out. I think that's kind of the cutoff. And by then, you would still have Brian Reynolds under team control for 2 more years. You'd have him for 24 and 25. By that time, Nick Gonzalez, Piguero, all those top prospects should already be up. You should know what you're working with. The thing that I like, though, about what they did with the draft and their bonus pool having the number 1 pick is the Henry Davises and the Anthony Solometos and the Lonnie White Juniors are all going to come in and help you stay consistent, kind of like what the Rays have done in Tampa Bay, where they just continuously draft well and create levels. As Meek Mill once said, Philly guy, I believe Meek Mill is a Philly guy. There's levels.
Absolutely a Philly guy, yeah.
Yeah, there's levels to this. And I think 2024 is my safe pick to say that this team can start winning. 2023 is my kind of, if things go exactly as planned, this is what you could expect.
That makes total sense. I got you. Yeah. So it's a few years down the line. Will guys like Brian Reynolds be part of that team? Who's to say? You figure you sell high, you get younger talent. I know you like him. I know.
Yeah, I do. And as you said, we are moving into another break. And of course, if you watch part 1, you already know that we're going to be talking about our wonderful friends over here at betonline.ag. As I mentioned in the last episode with Mr. Dan, don't ever listen to me on any betting advice at all. I have won some bets before, but the Carolina Panthers have burned me twice in all-day parlays on the NFL, as Dan kind of looks at me and is like, okay, cool, whatever. But we're back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of the basketball season is here, and more props, odds, and lines than ever before are all here with all kind of different sports going on. BetOnline remains your number 1 spot for all the basketball, hockey, and football action this season. Head to our new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That means you can put in $100. They'll give you $50 of free money if you use that promo code Locked On to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, baseball postseason, which is now gone, the NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all of the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Now, while me and Dan were recording, we both found this interesting thing about arbitration that could be proposed. And arbitration is one of the biggest things that's going on in the CBA talks right now because players want to get paid earlier. Arbitration, of course, is about a 5 to 6 year process. If you didn't know, it's a very messed up process because a lot of players go through it and they're much better. I think you're going to see this with Wander Franco in Tampa Bay. It's going to be one of those things where they just have to save the money because they don't have it, and they're not going to want to trade him because he's a generational talent. And that's really where arbitration gets in the way. Now, of course, the question at the bottom of the screen, if you're on YouTube, do you like wins above replacement based arbitration? Now, this is interesting because wins above replacement is a very interesting kind of thing to cover because, first of all, wins above replacement is not the only stat that says a player is good. There's plenty of players across baseball that have a positive wins above replacement that are not very good players. Can't name them, but I'm sure if I search Baseball Reference for about an hour and a half, I could probably give you at least 20 who have a positive WAR that probably batted 220 this year. It just happens. But with WAR-based arbitration, how would this work, you think, Dan? How would it work in terms of, say, Wander Franco has a 3.0 WAR or a 1.5 WAR? When does it determine that he's like a free agent or ready to get that big payday that he should really get from Tampa Bay or other top prospects that could be the same way?
Yeah, I don't know how they would specify or decide when guys would become eligible or not for a bigger payday. But it would be kind of funny if, from an entertainment standpoint, I'm not actually advocating for the system. I think WAR is a little, no pun intended, arbitrary. I think if it was a perfect stat, it would be if it was a perfect stat, it would be the only stat anyone should care about, right? Like,
yes.
how many wins are you going to add to a team? So in terms of, I mean, I like looking at WAR in corporation or in the context of how else a player played. I'm not on board for WAR to start dictating how much players make, but it would be quite funny, I think, from an entertainment value perspective, seeing players get annoyed. First, I don't think the players' union would go for it, but it would.
No, they would not. I don't think
It
they're
would
going to
be.
go for this at all.
It would be funny to see players get annoyed with the WAR system, and be like, because players oftentimes, certain players have different perspectives and points of view on analytics, and you're taking like a very progressive stat to determine how much they're making now. They would be declaring, once again, no pun intended, war on the whole system.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess a way that I could think of it in a certain light of if it would actually work or not is I guess you could take it'd be kind of a year by year thing, but you would look and calculate the average WAR across all of baseball. This is something I believe the NBA does when they consider contract extensions is were you above the mean of like amount of points, amount of this, amount of that, efficiency. I guess they could do it like that, or they could say like or like point or 2.1 was like the set, or you have to be like 75 percentile. 75th percentile would
That's the
mean
other
like
thing.
okay,
Is it's like, are they going to be like tax brackets, or is it just going to be like a multiplier? Like, I would be interested to see. I'll admit I didn't read through the full proposal, and if this actually came to fruition, I'd guess that there's going to be no negotiation and changes with it anyway. But it would be kind of funny, like your WAR times whatever equals your pay rate, or you have there be a cutoff. Like if your WAR is between 0 and 1, you get this. So the guy who has a 0.99 WAR is the same as the guy who has 0, and everyone's just targeting to get that 1 WAR, so to speak. And then okay, so here's really the problem, right? Because you can get a negative WAR, like you can pull your WAR can fluctuate, right? If the guy got to a certain WAR, would you
oh
then
god.
like would he not want to play because it's gonna like you're risking it? I mean, that's like paying guys based on an average statistic, like your OPS or your batting average or something like that. The guy gets to a 300 average, and suddenly he's got a shoulder injury that he can't play the rest of the year.
We've gone down a rabbit hole here on the Lockdog Crossover between the Phillies and the Pirates on if a player would stop playing based on his WAR to get more money.
It's
The
all things
sad
to
part
think about.
is I sadly don't disagree with you. That's the part that I'm
I mean,
very
I'm
stuck
kind of
about.
joking around, but it's something funny to think about.
I mean, because no offense, I mean, you look at a guy who what was it? Like Tatis this year was hurt. So would you take into account that his WAR across 90 or 110 games would be what his WAR would have been if he would have played in the other 50?
Well, that's the other
Like
thing.
that's another
So
thing
guys are
too.
going to get hurt. Like dialing it back to a little bit of seriousness now. If a guy gets hurt and he doesn't have a chance to increase his WAR over those games, how does
Does he
that
just
compare?
not get paid? Yeah. Does he just not get paid? Like,
So, I mean, there's a variety of reasons why I don't think this could actually work, but it's
no.
funny to think about.
I mean, but for the most part, if we're talking about actual like things with arbitration, 5 to 6 years is a very long time to be a guy on
It
arbitration.
is.
I do say
It is.
that. So cutting that in half, like a 2 to 3 or a 3 to 4, I think would be very,
That's
very
probably
good.
more of a happy medium than.
Yeah, and I think that's something the CBA could actually look into as a happy middle, like 3 to 4 years of arbitration. So say like Wander Franco's, I keep using him as an example, but he's a good example, is what, 20, I think. So he would come out of arbitration as a 24-year-old superstar and would probably make a lot of freaking money as a 24-year-old going on to 25. I mean, that would make sense. Like, so for Brian Reynolds, for example, he's through 2025 right now. The new, like, if that was to come through, 2023 would be his new cutoff. And by then he would be 29, 30 years old. So basically, I think the whole arbitration thing is going to be one of the biggest things that's going to stop the CBA from actually coming together and everything. Just because players want to get paid and owners are going to find ways to not pay them. It's just how it is. It's greasy owners that don't want to pay their players but still want to put out good baseball teams. Just to call it out like what it is. And it's something that obviously we're going to be looking forward to a lot. And hopefully they don't do a war based arbitration, because I will have absolutely no idea what to look for in September when O'Neal Cruz's war is a 1.89. And if he increases it to a 2, he gets a $5 million bonus. And then the Pirates are screwed because they can't give it to him. But, anyways, Dan, this was fun. We talked about a lot of different stuff. So where can the people find all of your work? Where can they find your podcast? Where can they find your Twitter? Obviously, it's on the screen here on YouTube, but you're going to be on YouTube soon. So tell the wonderful people where they can find you.
Yeah, Locked On Phillies at LO_Phillies on Twitter. My own personal Twitter account at Dan_Wilson4. And you can subscribe to Locked On Phillies on Apple and Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts.
Oh, yeah, of course. And part 1 of this podcast, of course, was up on Thursday, November 11th. I'm not giving you any timetable on the second one because I'm figuring it out right now as we speak. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this wonderful talk between me and Dan. Pennsylvania strong over here, even though he's an Eagles fan and I'm a Steelers fan. We can find ways to get along. Because shockingly, the only teams in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia that are in the same division are the Flyers and the Penguins. I will never understand that for the life of me. Pittsburgh doesn't have a basketball team. I wish they did. It would be called the Pittsburgh Phantoms after the Steel Phantom of Kennywood. I will advocate that for the rest of my life. And I feel like I'm talking very fast, but today's episode, of course, was brought to you by Locked On Bets. Make sure you go check out them over there. They're on kind of a hot streak right now. I believe they've won 12 out of their last 14 weeks. So if you want to go make some money and not listen to me, go listen to those guys over there. But Dan, thank you so much for coming on. It was a really fun time. I hope you enjoyed yourself. And guys, with that said, I will see you on the flip side next week. Of course, we're going to have Gary, Adam, and everybody joining us next week as whatever goes on here at Locked On Pirates and in Pirates Nation and over at the Phillies with Dan Wilson, we're going to be on it this offseason. So thank you guys so much.
Always fun, Ethan.
Oh, yeah, of course.